Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. Here I am outside number 86, Eton Square, London, in the very chic area of Belgravia. Behind me is the townhouse of the Earl of Halifax. Obviously, there have been many Earls of Halifax because the title passes from father to son down the generations. Still a living title. There's more than one son. It passes to the eldest. If one of them is born outside of wedlock, it only passes to those who are born in holy matrimony. Anyway, I particularly want to talk about Edward Wood because the surname of the family is Wood, but the highest title is Earl of Halifax. So Edward Wood was born in 1881 into this very well-established Yorkshire family. And he soon inherited the courtesy title Lord Irwin. So his father was Earl of Halifax, and he was Lord Irwin when his father died. He later became Earl of Halifax. So, well, why don't I call him Lord Halifax, this Edward Wood I'm talking about. And he went to Eton, as was virtually compulsory for the nobility at the time, where he was very distinguished academically, and on to Christ Church, Oxford, which was considered the acme of education and indeed social cachet back then. Of course, not everybody at Christ Church, Oxford was brainy. Remember, Oxford University is divided into 39 colleges, but back in about 1899, when Lord Halifax went up to Oxford, there were not quite so many colleges, more like 20 colleges, almost an all-male university. So having gone down from there, he went into politics. He was a conservative, fairly conventional, not outspoken, very dignified, very respectable. He was enormously tall and very slender. However, he had no right hand, and he used to keep his right hand behind his back a lot of the time, had a specially made glove which resembled a hand and things like that. And despite having only one hand, he used to like riding to the hounds. He was a passionate Anglican, and he was very much of the high church, the bells and smells, an Anglo-Catholic. Yes, the monarch was the head of his church. However, he believed in bringing back lots of the Catholic traditions, calling priests father, believing in transubstantiation, believing in sacraments, even if not 7 of them, venerating the saints, having monks and nuns, things like that. So he worked his way up through politics, and he was here as an MP in the First World War. He couldn't serve in the army or the Royal Navy because he had only one hand. So Lord Irwin in 1926 went out to India to become the Viceroy, and it was a tense moment in India. There was considerable unrest. The Congress Party was agitating for dominion status, as in the same situation as pertained in Australia or Canada at the same time. So India to be internally self-governing, but within the British Empire, still relying on the British Empire for foreign affairs and defence, cooperating with them all. However, the government at the time, it was a Conservative government, said no, the time is not ripe for that, was really trying to kick that into the long grass. The opposition party, Labour, led by James Ramsay MacDonald, said no, we welcome this. So Gandhi was leading a campaign of non-cooperation. Indeed, the Salt March was going on whilst Lord Irwin, as he was then, was Viceroy of India. Lord Halifax did not want to give Gandhi his victory, so he made sure there was no policeman within a mile of Gandhi when Gandhi's salt march got to the sea, and Gandhi evaporated some water and got his salt without paying the tax in it, things like that. So Lord Irwin tried to use minimum force, but indeed some protesters were killed. Some peaceful protests did turn violent. So in 1931, he came back. The Round Table Conference had ended, as in Gandhi, Congress Party leaders, Muslim League leaders, the Hindu Mahasabha, which is a Hindu religious party, the Liberal Party, the Unionist Party, various other political parties, the princes, that's to say the hereditary Indian rulers of the princely states. Many of them came to London for discussions in 1931, the Round Table Conference. However, it did not put an end to the protests. So Halifax was back here in the 1930s, and the main thing to address was the Great Depression, was mass unemployment, employment touching 25% at one stage. Earl Halifax had this as his townhouse. His home estate was at Garrowby in Yorkshire, and he had the title Earl of Halifax because the family had most of their estates near that Yorkshire town, Halifax. Anyway, so one of the political hot potatoes of the late 1930s was appeasement. Germany was a Third Reich. She was flexing her muscles, seeking to expand. Should the United Kingdom set her face against this? Should there be sanctions? Should there even be war? Could France be relied upon? What about the Dominions, South Africa, Australia, Canada, Newfoundland? Would they fight against Germany or not? Anyway, he was thought to be more of an appeaser, and that was really the conventional wisdom until late 1938. And indeed, he was Foreign Secretary. So the Second World War broke out, and he was in the cabinet, a very notable figure. So May 1940, the Norway debates, the Franco-British campaign in Norway to save Norway had failed. The Wehrmacht had swept all before them. And I think it was, who was it, Amory, this MP called Leo Amory. He quoted Cromwell and shouting at the Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, "For God's sake, go." And Chamberlain's authority was fatally undermined. He was jeered from all sides. So a new Prime Minister was going to be chosen. And the two candidates were the Earl of Halifax or Winston Churchill. Churchill, he dubbed Halifax the Holy Fox because of his, how would I put it, his vulpine cunning, but also his penchant for high Anglican worship, and also liked fox hunting. The German press had dubbed him Lord Halali, as in, is a hunting cry, a bit like tally-ho, saying that he's just really out of the 19th century and has no understanding of the modern world and is really out of touch, trying to ridicule him as a stage Englishman. But anyway, George VI picked Churchill to be Prime Minister, and some people say, oh, well, Halifax didn't want it. He thought that the war was going to be lost. He'd let Churchill lose it. I really don't know the ins and outs of that. People say it was even by accident that Churchill was picked over Halifax. I doubt it. Now, Halifax had more kudos in the Conservative Party. Remember, Churchill was disliked by many for his operatics. They remembered his involvement in the Gallipoli disaster, things like that. And they remember he was completely immoderate on the issue of India, and they felt that Churchill was too much of a glory boy. Churchill then immediately offered Halifax to be ambassador to the United States, which Halifax accepted. Now, it was a crucial role, the United States then being neutral in 1940, to get as much possible aid out of the United States under the Lend-Lease Agreement, and to get Congress to vote for this exemption, the Neutrality Acts, to allow the United Kingdom to purchase weapons and other materials from the United States despite the war, which the Neutrality Acts otherwise would have forbidden. And Roosevelt, fortunately, was deeply sympathetic to the United Kingdom and thought it was crucial to America's national security that the United Kingdom survive. Had the American president taken the opposite attitude, then the UK may well have been done for. And contrary to popular belief, Roosevelt and Churchill did not always get along well. That was really just a public myth, because it would not do for Americans and British people to dislike each other, thinking their leaders were squabbling all the time. Anyway, so that was that. And after the war, he was no longer ambassador to the United States. And really, his political career was over. Well, there was a Labour government. He was considered too old to be Prime Minister. Really, Churchill was too old to be leader of the Conservative Party. And things had passed him by. He was also a Fellow of All Souls, because at Oxford University, there's a college which is only for graduates. And there are these competitive exams to sit. Only 2 Fellows of All Souls are elected each year. Of all the men and women who graduate each year, the top 2 get to be Fellows of All Souls. I shan't talk about the selection procedure. So that's like being part of l'Académie Française or something like that. So he spent quite a lot of time there because he was a very bookish sort, and he died in 1959. So there's a memorial plaque up to him at All Souls. And in obituaries, it was remembered that his reputation would be controversial for some time, partly because of his fervent advocacy of appeasement in the 1930s. But that appeared to be a reasonable thing to many people. He strove to avoid war when it seemed a war was likely to end in British defeat. Even if it ended in victory, there would be very high casualties indeed if there was another war against Germany. And the casualties were estimated to be much higher than actually they turned out to be. So that is the Earl of Halifax, a scintillating historical figure and someone who is the subject of many what-ifs. His prime ministership is one of the most intriguing counterfactual possibilities that we can speculate on.